Welcome back to every naval battle in history. Having lost much of their fleet in the Egyptian expedition of the 450s, the Athenians had consolidated the Delian League into an Athenian Empire, notably moving the treasury from Delos to Athens. They had sought peace with Sparta, and the two had taken up the Persian idea of having external arbiters help resolve disputes between cities without going to war. For around 30 years this peace held, with both sides going to significant efforts to maintain it. And then, the Corinthians couldn't help themselves in their long-running grudge with Corfu, a Corinthian colony, and it all came crashing down. In this episode we delve into the Battle of Sybota, the pebble rolling down a hill that would engulf Athens in an avalanche. Let's talk again about Corinth and Corfu. Only the third naval battle known to history was between Corinth and Corfu around 664 BCE. Appropriately enough, we covered in episode 3. Despite being quite a long way apart in Greece, these two had a very long-running and toxic relationship that neither seemed to be able to let go of. Corinth has been settled since prehistoric times and appears in history in the 8th century BCE. Corfu, or Corcyra as it was known at the time, actually first appears in written history earlier in 1300 BCE. This did not stop Corinth from colonising the island around 730 BCE. Being a client settlement in the ancient Greek world involved a system of showing honour, which mostly means making payments. Setting a colony up cost a lot of money, and the investment was supposed to show a return over a very long period of time. The people of Corfu appear to have had differing views that their money was better spent at home rather than in the Corinthian treasury. But there was love too. Despite all these antagonisms and occasional wars, Corinth and Corfu had jointly founded a new colony, Epidamnos, in modern-day Albania in 627 BCE. Now, pay attention because things are about to get weird. The ancient Greek world was a strange and fractured place. Trade, commerce, language, and food bound things together. But then there were countless divisions between Athens and Sparta, pro and anti-Persia, who owed money to whom, and between democratic and aristocratic factions. Remember that there were many democracies happily existing inside the Persian Empire, and that at times the Athenian aristocratic faction was ascendant, notably under Cimon. Epidamnos had been set up before democratic ideas had started taking off, and was a pretty strict oligarchy, ruled by the rich, for the rich, to return an investment to Corfu and Corinth. There was a revolution, and democrats expelled the aristocrats. Then Corfu sided with the aristocrats, who showed true class and noblesse oblige by raiding their home city with the help of Illyrian pirates. Corinth sided with the democrats, and an internal dispute on the streets of a city in Albania had set the Corinthian sphere to war with itself. This was only the beginning. Earlier in the 30-year peace, the Athenian colony of Samos had rebelled. As per the peace agreement, the Spartan world had at least sat on the sidelines and let Athens deal with them, rebuffing Samos's entreaties for assistance. Corinth now announced that it wanted to deal with its rogue colony of Corfu. Athens said, well, this is different. And it's one of those cases where both sides were completely justified from their own perspectives. There is nothing quite so dangerous in history as two sides completely justified from their own perspectives. Corinth started building a fleet to attack Corfu, and the islanders responded with a fleet of their own. When they came to blows off Sybota in 433 BCE, the Corinthian fleet numbered 150 ships, Corfu had 120, with a further 10 Athenian ships in attendance. It was the biggest Greek-on-Greek naval battle in history at that time. And remember, this is an internal Corinthian conflict. Corinth didn't write the history the way Athens did, so they're somewhat lost to us, but this certainly gives some perspective to their wealth and influence. Let's remember also that the plucky rebel colony of Corfu is fighting to reinstate the piratical ruling class of Epidamnos, and the wellspring of democracy, Athens, is protecting them against the democratic faction which kicked the whole thing off. Never think a shared ideology is any substitute for convergence of interests. At this point, Athens thinks it's only committed to a defensive alliance with Corfu, Where can the harm in that be? Now to the battle. Thucydides reports that this was an old-fashioned battle, with boarding actions preferred to ramming and sinking. Now this could be because the Corinthian world hadn't kept up to date with naval advances, or it could be because both sides were keen to capture ships. Corfu, of course, is not far off the coast of Sybota. Here's a Google Street View from just north of Sybota where you can clearly see the island across the strait. The Athenian ships, commanded in part by Chimon's son Lacedaemonius, were not allowed to fight unless the Corinthians were threatening to land on Corfu. There is much speculation that giving Lacedaemonius such a paltry force and constricted rules of engagement was a calculated insult to Chimon's faction. Unhelpfully, the Athenians formed up on the Corfu fleet's right wing and then failed to engage as their rules of engagement had not been met. This allowed the Corinthians to smash Corfu on that side of the battle, while the reverse occurred on the other wing, resulting in nothing so much as a wheeled scrum. The Corinthian right wing collapsed, fled to the beach, and was then burned on the beach by pursuing Corfuan ships. While that was occurring, the Corinthian left wing was doing so well that the Athenians felt they had to get involved, lost anyway, and that left the Corinthians in control of the seas, in which they proceeded to murder and enslave the survivors they could find. The next day, Athenian reinforcements arrived, and the Corinthians decided that landing on Corfu was a bad idea. Corinth claimed victory, but sailed away. Athens and Corfu had lost 70 ships from a starting fleet of 130, Corinth just 30. While if one is just counting sunk ships, it's a Corinthian victory. On the other hand, they had failed to achieve their objective, the invasion of Corfu. At this point, Athens is thinking they've had a win. Corinth is contained, Corfu is now an ally, and no lasting damage done. But Corinth thinks war has begun, and the next year will attack the Athenian ally Potidæa. The long peace ended off Sybota. 25 years of war would follow. Sending just 10 ships would spell the end of the Athenian Empire. A successful example of the strategy of minimal deterrence in the short term, which in the medium term was utterly destructive. Strap in, folks, we've got a lot more to cover as we take on every naval battle in history. Smash those like and subscribe buttons, you don't want to get left behind.